Hey everybody, welcome back. I wanted to do a video to talk about a topic that I believe is absolutely relatable to our martial arts training. This is actually something that I have learned through my study of different kinds of relationships, but it really has a lot of application to our martial art. And I've thought a lot about this, trying to come up with the right way to describe this. So I apologize ahead of time if this gets a little heady. I'm going to try to keep it very on point and applicable to give you just enough information for you to maybe take a look at things in a new light. And maybe this might be a little something that you can use that can help you further in your training and to have a balanced approach to your training. And the topic that I want to talk about is the masculine feminine polarity. And we hear masculine and feminine in martial arts, most typically associated with the yin yang or the yin yo wheel, the two, the black and the white, and how they circle and that sort of stuff. And there is a lot of relatability to that. It does actually fall into that, but I want to stay specific to the terminology of masculine and feminine for the purposes of what I'm going to try to convey to you. And I want to make a clarification right up front that I'm going to use these terms interchangeably, but I'm going to use these terms not as a descriptor of a biological gender. So when I say masculine or I say feminine, I'm not specifically saying man or woman. A healthy, balanced individual has a healthy balance of both of those polarities in them. So when I say masculine and feminine, I'm really talking about the polarity of energy that we all have. And that for different people, there's going to be different levels of that. But there's also a core. Some people have a masculine core, some people have a feminine core. And again, it's not limited by gender. That you could be a man with a feminine core or a woman with a masculine core. And it's so I'm not trying to box in those terms. I want to be able to describe these freely using masculine and feminine with the understanding that they both exist or can exist in the same person regardless of gender. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. And of course, if you identify as a particular gender, that sort of thing, I don't want to get into that. That goes way outside the scope of what I'm trying to do here. So please understand this from the perspective that I'm trying to share. That I'm talking about energy polarities, not sexual orientation, gender, biological gender, identity. I'm not talking about any of that. So I want to make that very clear. I don't want a bunch of nasty emails from people and messages. So when I talk about this polarity, what that means is, what is a polarity? So a polarity has to do with the relationship between two opposites. So you have a North Pole and a South Pole. You have a left and right. There's a Ura and a Mote. You have these different opposites, and the opposites are connected to each other through their polarity. And it's through this polarity that they function together. And it's not a dependency, but it is an absolute it's a relationship where they both strengthen each other. So in a perfect balanced polarity, each one is its most purest best form. But when that polarity is off, it actually weakens both. And I'll describe how that applies to our martial arts and to you personally, and see what you think, and maybe this can help you. So let's talk about the difference between masculine and feminine. Masculinity is basically, if I were to describe masculinity as simplistic as I can, I would say masculinity represents structure. It represents, like, think of like a container. That is masculinity. It has shape, it has structure, and through that, it provides stability, security, and support. And that's really what masculinity is. Now, there are other traits to masculinity, such as focus, direction. Masculinity is also logic based, um, and factual based, and that sort of thing. The flip side to that, you have feminine. Feminine is fluid. It's responsive or reactive. It's intuitive. It's emotion. It's feeling, that sort of thing. And you can see the interplay on that um, when you have somebody who's very emotional, and then after the emotions kind of run their course, then the logic can come back, and now they're able to really kind of formulate a plan and take an action. So you could see how this polarity works. You don't want to suppress your emotion. You want to let the emotion flow out. So that way, once the emotion flows out, now it starts to subside, and now the logic can take over. So that's how polarities work, at least one example of that. But what does this have to do with martial arts? Well, martial arts are a thing. Martial arts are not some people will say, oh, this, martial arts is a living thing. Mm, I argue that martial arts itself really is just a thing. It's the people in the martial arts who are living. And it's the people that bring the life into the art. Otherwise, it's just ink on paper. It's just name, forms or kata or whatever. But it's the people that add that. So martial arts itself, when you're taught a technique is basically a container. You have the structure, balance, timing, things like that. You're learning very specific step one, step two, step three. This is how you put your foot there. This is how you turn your wrist. This is how you do this and that. It's structured. And that represents that masculine component to training. The feminine aspect to training comes with the experience where you develop that intuitiveness. You develop that sensitivity in the training that you can sense the subtle shifts of things. You can you can capture the feeling in the moment of things, that innate timing that you can't see, think, act fast enough. It has to be instinctual or, like I said, intuitive. That's all part of that feminine process. It has fluidity to it. It has continuity to it of motion. Um, it's adaptive. That's all part of that feminine aspect to the training. And I use the analogy of a container for masculinity and liquid for femininity to describe the relationship between the two. And this is a very significant point, and you really need to pay attention to this because this doesn't just apply to martial arts. That the masculine sets the shape, it sets the structure, it sets the environment. And that environment needs to have structure, it needs to have the security or safety, and it needs to have the support or the consistency, the support of that. So when you look in a dynamic between the masculine and feminine, that the feminine seeks that safety, it seeks that structure, it seeks that direction, that leadership. That's what femininity seeks. That's why femininity is attracted to a strong, not toxic, but a healthy, strong masculinity. The attraction works this way, that femininity is drawn towards that because it's seeking those things that the masculinity has. And when you look at it in terms of a container and liquid, that the masculinity representing this container, that the liquid then naturally can fill that container. By themselves, they are not strong. If you take the masculine structure and you don't fill it with anything, you have an empty box that's full of air. And an empty box full of air can be collapsed very easily. So that itself, just that masculine structure and everything, is not good enough. Same with the femininity. If you have the liquid that doesn't have any sort of container, it's just spilled out and it'll dissipate. It goes a million different directions and it just dissipates and dries up. It doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't have any it just fades away. And that's actually a very interesting analogy, but we could talk about that some other time. So what both need each other. So when the structure is set, the liquid enters that structure. The liquid assumes the shape of that structure. It assumes the shape of that structure, and that structure provides the stability. It provides the security that there's no holes in it, because if there's a hole in that structure, the liquid runs out and dissipates and goes away. So that structure has to be complete. It has to be solid. At the same time, there has to be some freedom in that structure too. You can't box in the liquid, or the liquid runs stagnant, etc. But the liquid has to be allowed to splash about. And that's again, when we talk about toxic masculinity seeks to dominate and control. Healthy masculinity sets the environment while allowing the freedom for the femininity to come and go. And that's a very important aspect of training, because when you're training in these kata, which are the structure, as you learn these kata, you also are learning to rely on that. You're learning that if I continue to move this particular way, it's going to work every time. That's hopefully your training is allowing that for you, that you know that this particular way of doing the technique is going to work. So there's the structure of the technique. There's also the security of it, that you know that this technique is doing, or is going to do, what it's supposed to do, protect you and reverse a bad situation. And at the same time, there's support with it. You already know what to do. So as long as you keep following step one, step two, step three, you're going to get that result. That there's that support that comes with that, because you have that knowledge, you have that ability to keep training it. And so with that, when you have all of that, then you relax. You relax in your technique. You don't lose your structure. The structure still has to be there for that security and that support and stability. Uh, but you can relax in that. And because you can relax in that, you now become more in tune to the deeper levels of things. You now become more in tune to the feeling of things. It can become more intuitive and more adaptive without losing the actual structure. And then you can get into the shuhari and some of those other Japanese concepts of 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 breaking the technique, preserving technique, breaking the technique, et cetera, transforming, et cetera, all those kinds of heady types things. But it's really that same process in a simplistic nature. It's creating the masculine structure, the stuff that masculinity provides, so that the feminine intuitiveness, adaptiveness, flowiness, all of that, the softness, feels safe, secure, and has that leadership, or has that direction, that it can be itself. It can flow and move and be itself, and not be trapped into stagnant, or not be in that toxic. It's free to move and flow. And your training should be a balance of that. But in order to have this, you have to first have this. In order to have all of that that the feminine energy provides, you have to create this masculine environment first. You have to use your masculinity to create that environment. And that's, I think, where people mistake things in their training, is that they're so quick to go to feeling. They're so quick to go to the fluid, soft, all this kind of stuff, but they're not really, they haven't set the environment for that. They haven't created that structure with that security and support and direction and everything and focus. They haven't created that to create an environment where that can flourish effectively without just fading out and dissipating. So I hope this is starting to make sense to you. Um, and it's interesting when you see kind of how this plays out and how people train. There are some people that are so in their masculine and how they train, they don't have that polarity of the femininity in good balance. And so they become almost like robotic, like machines, and they're just, that's it. And they're structured. And then you have the flip opposite. You have the people that are so just shiatsu jutsu, they're just so touchy, and everything is about feeling and everything. But it's so soft that it doesn't have any of that consistency, that reliability, and quite frankly, the effectiveness that a nice structured form would provide. They don't have that. And I hope I don't step on any toes or offend anybody with that. If that's the way you train, cool. But I just, from my experience, that polarity is missing. And so that's an imbalance in the training progression. No matter which end you're on, it's an imbalance. So, and what happens is that, and you see, this is what happens in relationships. When the feminine does not feel safe, when the feminine does not feel supported, when the feminine does not feel that leadership, that direction, then their femininity doesn't feel safe to come out. So what happens is the polarity will shift. They actually become masculine because they're trying to provide that for themselves because they're not getting that from the masculine. So they're going to become masculine so that they can try to create that. Because how can they be feminine when they don't have that masculine presence? So the masculine becomes the dominant. And when you have masculine and masculine, it's toxic. The masculine over here has a choice. It's either going to reject or it's going to turn feminine. And that's where things turn bad. So, and I don't want to get too far into that. That's relationship theory. And I can talk about that some other time on another channel or whatever. But as far as martial arts training goes, you can see some of that when it comes to toxic behaviors in martial arts, how people are ego driven or they're so set in their ways that they're just that's it, they can't see anything else, and they don't grow, or people who are so just lost in this hidey flighty whatever kind of guru-esque type of approach to feel the energies and the sparkles in my aura and all this kind of stuff, that they're so out there in their own illusion that they lack that connection to practical reality, and then they're going to get killed if they ever end up in a real situation. But this is what this happens when these polarities become off. So what can we do? Well, first of all, and this is kind of sidelining into another topic, but I'm going to throw this in here because it does relate. You have to first understand, what is your core? Are you a masculine core or a feminine core? And there's a reason why this is significant, because martial artists, it's not a cookie cutter process. And as instructors, I think it's really important to also recognize that difference, because the way you're teaching somebody or working with somebody, you have to be able to communicate with their core. What is their core? So, and I want to make sure that people really understand that it's okay, whatever your core is. It's okay. If you're a guy and you have a feminine core, it doesn't mean you're feminine. It just means that's your core. You still have a masculine, but your core is feminine. And it doesn't mean that you're less of a man or whatever or weak. That's just your core. That's just how you function. You're an emotion-based man. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, in fact, in my opinion, the the most manliest that somebody can be is when they're in touch with their core, and then they're free to be who they really are. That to me is the most, and I don't care if it's a man or a woman. That's like the highest form of being, is when you live fully from your own core of who you are. So if you are that feminine person where you have that intuition, you have that connectivity to your emotions and stuff, and and I'm assuming it's a healthy relationship. You're not traumatized or you have this emotional instability and stuff, but just like that, a good sense of self. You have that sensitivity and things like that. That's fantastic. If you're the other way, if you're more of that masculine core where you're just naturally somebody that's focuses on logic and focuses on structure and plans and making plans and wants to set goals and go get those goals, goal-based individual, that's that's the masculine. That's okay too, whether you are a biological man or woman, it doesn't matter. That's your core, that's who you are inside, and you need to approach your training from that perspective. So first, recognizing what is your core, I think, is very essential in knowing what's going to resonate with you, what is going to be the best approach toward training. And if you're an instructor, recognizing that in your students, is this person a feminine core or a masculine core? And that helps you identify their needs. That helps you identify what this person needs to grow, to become this balanced person. Because whether you're masculine core or feminine core, you have to still work the masculine and feminine. It's just there's whatever your core is, that's what's going to come natural to you. So you need to work on the things that don't come natural to you to help balance that. It's like if I'm naturally right-handed, it's easy for me to do a lot of motor skills with my right hand. So in order for me to be a well-balanced, effective martial artist, I need to practice on my left side even more than my right side so that I can develop it equally, so that I have equal ability to as much as I possibly can with either side. So it's the same kind of thing with that polarity. So if your core is masculine, then you need to spend more time working on maybe the feminine aspects of it, because the masculine part's going to come easier to you. It's going to be easy for you to learn and develop the structure of things, to learn kata quickly by the numbers, to develop a plan of action, follow a curriculum, study, all that kind of stuff. So you still do that, but then you want to also take time to work on sensitivity drills and learning how to integrate breathing and moving, to develop more flow, to develop more maybe softer touch, to feel kind of how's this person weight shifting and things like that. And then pay attention to how your training makes you feel inside, being more aware of that kind of thing. Um, and that's actually interesting how the language works in that too. That the difference between masculine and feminine is that masculine will say, I think da 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 da. Feminine will say, I feel like da 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 da, or this feels like da 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 da. Masculine will train because it's part of their schedule, it matches their goals, and so they're gonna go and they're gonna train because it fits the structure that they've laid out. Femininity is going to go train because it feels good. It's fun to train. They enjoy the interactions. They enjoy the feeling of training. Masculine is going to go because they're goal oriented. Feminine is going to go because they're experience oriented. So, and I'm using these as black and white opposites. The same polarity exists in the same person. You can go and have a goal and be goal oriented, but also enjoy the experience of it and the process of it. It's just one's going to be more natural for you. One's going to be at your core, and people have different levels of it. Not everybody is perfectly balanced in those. In fact, the majority of people are not balanced in those because we've never learned about this stuff until recently. This is all fairly new psychology and sciences that even though in martial arts we've heard about these things, nobody's really understood them on a real, in my opinion, on a real applicable level. So if you're an instructor and you identify that you have this person that has a feminine core, you know that if you want them to understand something, you can present it to them in a way that they will understand by focusing on words like, how does this feel to you? Or try to do it, if it feels more like this, and like doing things on with them, demonstrating technique on them so they can feel what that feels like. You can focus on all of that, but then balance it with, okay, so I want you to, this is how you do this kata. It has 3 moves. First, you're going to learn this one, then you're going to learn that one, then you're going to learn this part, then we're going to put it together into one part. But I want you to practice each one of these parts at least 10 times on the right, 10 times on the left. See how I'm just very, very structured, very methodical? That's very masculine. So you're going to take that feminine core person and you're going to use language initially to kind of help satisfy the needs of that feminine core, but then at the same time you're going to provide that structure, that masculinity, so that the two can balance, and that will give them the structure that they could still stay connected to their feminine core while still practicing in the structure of the techniques you're showing them. Same thing, a masculine core. If you have somebody who's a masculine core student, that you're going to communicate in masculine terms, you're going to tell them the same kinds of things about how you're going to learn these 3 parts, you're going to do this and this, but maybe now you're going to say, okay, as you practice moving back into this kamae, I want you to really try to time that where you can feel the motion coming through their arm, receive that arm where you just start to make that connection and then you float along that and try to See if you can, like a radar in your hand, you can feel the energy of that arm coming at you as you're guiding that and moving that, and work on that continuity of motion. Because the continuity of motion requires you to have a sensitivity of the opponent's body. So it's not just you're actually flowing with that body and feeling that. So that's an example of how you can approach things from a masculine core to give the masculine, or masculine language to give the masculine core what it needs, but at the same time balance it with the feminine aspects of it so that they can have that polarity. When you approach things from that perspective of understanding what the core is and then working through that, you're going to find that there's a really dynamic shift in how people understand things, how you yourself understand things, and the results that you bring to your training. So I hope you found this useful. I hope that this enlightened you a little bit more, maybe on understanding human behavior, understanding human relationships, because martial arts are about relationships. I did a video on that. You can go back and find it. Martial arts are about relationships, and it's relationship with, and I think it was one of my live casts. You have to click on which ones are my live videos, but I did this one about relationships. And really, we're talking about three relationships, actually, four relationships. You have the relationship to the art, you have the relationship to your teacher, and you have the relationship to each other, and then you have the relationship to yourself. And the relationship to yourself is kind of like the center hub with those three around it. So this understanding your core, understanding what masculine, feminine, things like that. What are your needs from those perspectives? What do you need for that feminine or masculine core? What do you need to create the polarity with the other side, the masculine or feminine? And and understanding that, and then so having that relationship, and then that's what influences the relationship you have to your teacher, to the art, and to each other. So think about this. Do some deep analysis on this, and don't let your ego take over. It's okay. And I keep emphasizing about us guys because one, I'm a guy, but two, guys really just struggle with their ego when it comes to this stuff. When I have talked to women about it, stuff, they're more accepting of this. They understand this stuff. Guys really trip up on this, especially when you talk about femininity and feminine core and stuff. They have this image of what that means that's completely not correct. But I think as I think a lot of modern guys now are starting to understand this stuff. They're starting to become a little bit more open-minded to this stuff, that we are equally masculine and feminine, and the aspects of both of those exist within us, and that we need to embrace who we are. And that sets the groundwork for everything, not just how you train and how you learn. And it also sets the groundwork for all your relationships, your professional and personal relationships. So really, I think take some time with this and really try to understand, first of all, what masculine and feminine is, and then really do a deep analysis of yourself and which one you identify with the most. And then go back and think about your training. Think about the classes that you've been through. When you go back and think about what your most significant experiences were, I think I think you're going to find that to be quite revealing. Why was that experience so significant to you? What did you like the most about this particular instructor? What did you like the most about this particular session? And I think when you look at it through the lens of masculine and feminine, I think you're going to find that that really has, it's like turning a light on to what your core really is. Um, so, and be honest with yourself. And maybe you won't know right away. Maybe you'll think you're one way, but then you're kind of, I don't really know. Maybe I could be this one. That's okay too. Sometimes it's hard to know what your core is if if you're kind of practicing both sides or developing both sides. It can kind of blur. So don't be so fixated to instantly add or label yourself. Just be aware. Just start to be aware of this stuff. Um, Martial arts training is a process of self discovery. Besides learning all these cool techniques and and all these different applications and stuff. It's really about a process of self-discovery. It's about a process of revealing yourself. And sometimes things are revealed you don't like, but that's you. That's what's in you, and you can certainly fix those things or heal those things if they're trauma based or if they're ugly character traits that you're like, oh my God, you can change all that. That's okay. But first is accepting and acknowledging that that's you, that that's what's coming out of you. So take this as a self exploration exercise. And once you apply that to yourself and you set that, you're going to start to see that everything that emanates out from that now becomes more natural for you and becomes more productive because it's natural. So I hope you found this valuable. I'm sorry it's over 30 minutes long. I wanted to keep it shorter, but this is such a complex and deep subject, but also I think it's a really cool subject that we can all really benefit from. So I hope you enjoy this. Please hit subscribe. I need subscribers. Please like my videos. Drop me comments. I love the dialogue that's happening now on my videos. This is great. I don't have to agree. It doesn't matter. I just like the dialogue. So we can all share our experiences. And if you are um, if you are experimenting with some of this stuff, or you're taking a deeper look into things, and you're starting to really apply some of what I talked about in here, share with me your experiences. How did it work for you? What did you notice? That let's share with each other on that, because this is a fairly recent line of thinking, or a fairly recent exploration into human psychology that I think that we all can have something to contribute into that. So, again, thank you so much. And as I always say, stay happy, stay healthy, and no matter what, keep training.